Let's see if we can do the trick.
Zo te zien gaat dat lukken. Dankjewel, Ricardo. Ben ik dat? Oké. Ja, ik vond dat erg.
Okay. So it's really interesting. Ricardo and I had discussed it on several occasions whether we could do this in the Fire Academy, whether we could simulate it. It would be interesting for both parties. And yes, I saw that sometimes people think that, you know, it's easy to do these simulations. Aha, but they're not. The upside of the University of Eindhoven is that we have computation there, computation power in the form of computers, but also the form of students. Because if you have to do everything yourself, you know, it's not going to be that much fun. In Eindhoven, I'm a professor and a fellow in fire safety. I do that 1 day a week, so I don't spend a lot of time on that, but it gives us a wonderful opportunity that we grasped. Those of you who attended my workshop yesterday, I talked about conditions and how you can determine the model. So this was yesterday's sheet, I think, more or less. Let me start with the same sheet as yesterday. Okay, it's about a combination of two things. It's about a combination of fire and structures, and also fuel characteristics and structural characteristics. And they will determine the fire dynamics and the response that you see in this case in a residential unit. A fire outside, you know, that's not that dangerous. We don't have any victims in the Netherlands, at least. In a building, not really interesting. Well, some buildings are interesting, depending on the architect, but ordinarily we don't have any victims there. Some people tend to fall from balconies, but yeah, it's not such an issue. But the combination is a nuisance, and in combination we think in one direction, which is a nuisance because we often think that a fire will affect the structure. The structure will heat up, and that leads to collapse and danger for any people present in the building. But the building also affects the fire. You see that the fire development inside is much faster than outside, and anything you do within the structure will affect the fire, which is what Ricardo just said. Whatever you open, the window or the front door will really affect the fire. And you get this information in simulations, and this is really what you want to see in simulations. That is why simulations are so important. And I thought, well, I have to show you very quickly what kind of structures we're talking about, but you saw this in Ricardo's sheets already. These residential units are rather old. Well, I thought they were a rather good state. I thought they were going to be demolished, given the location. Quite imaginable, but anyway. These residential units are really small, and they're stone. It's important for me to simulate the structure. And this is moderately insulated, poorly insulated even, I would say. And there's some thermal accumulation. It is a stone building, a wooden roof, which is leaking, sort of ventilating, and the ventilation itself. Part is single pane and sometimes multi-pane, which has different behavior in terms of collapsing. So this is something you want to take into account in terms of the outside structure. We modulated the the ground floor and the first floor, and the roof was also included in the permeation computation. Other conditions: fuel, the layout, and furniture. Furniture is rather normal, as Ricardo said. It's all very small, as you can see. The furniture is reasonably light, and we saw this in the simulations as well, that at some point fuel is, there's no more fuel. And if you think if I would have had another fuel, I might have had an entirely different scenario. Correct. That would have been the case. These are just some impressions of the living room. And I will be showing you a simulation experiment in which we have the fire start here in this television set. So it's a fire that starts in the living room in a television. This is the simulation experiment that you'll be seeing. This is the layout. This is the living room, 2 sofas, table, coffee table, 2 chairs, TV, cupboard, lamp. So rather well defined, I would say. So you can see where we purchased it. That is, if you can read it, you'll find the brand names on the slide. So we're going to look at the fire that is going to start over here. And that's interesting and exciting because it's an a priori simulation. We didn't look at what happened in actual fact because we did this just before the experiment was conducted. So it's very exciting. There are lots of uncertainties. And 2 other important preconditions. These are the simulators. They are the students that introduced the data. Peter Althoff of the Safety Region Northeast, the Netherlands, Dolphin, on a student of the Eindhoven Technical University. Completely different backgrounds. That's interesting. They have different perspectives. And I think that's really interesting. So very exciting cooperation. What I will be showing you has not been validated, not by me, not by anybody else either. So whether the ultimate result that we're going to report is going to be this, I don't know exactly. But we will have to compare that with the experiments. This is the model, by the way, that we made. And what you see in this model, these dots here are the local fuels, the sofas, the chairs, TV, etc. Those are the dots. And then the other model is the zones that have been defined, being the rooms. May look a bit weird, and this is because everything has been drawn in squares. It doesn't really matter what the shape of the space is, as long as the masses of the zones are correct. Anyway, these are the lines, these blue lines, I believe. These are the lines with door openings and vent openings, etc. There are also vent grids over here. So these are the connections between the zones, these vents. Here you see a simulation of what we expected there, and what we expected is determined by the quality of the glass. These cones is the combustion or ignition of the fuel. You see that it stops, it doesn't go any further than this. So there's no more fuel. So what did we do here? All these ventilation openings in the facade were kept closed. So the glass was kept closed and left intact. No, yes, oh yes, no, sorry. Except in a single pane, which is here. You can't really see it in this model. But here you see a bit of a window that can be opened, but it's single pane. And the rest is double pane. So in this case, we allowed it to collapse. It's single glass, and it's close to the local fire, so you expect that to collapse. So double glazing, you don't know. So we left that intact as it is. This brings us to the next simulation. As I said, we don't know whether the glass is going to burst and to crumble or not, or in part, or only the single glazing, only double glazing, or at random. But Ricardo doesn't know, I don't know. It doesn't only depend on the quality of the glass, but it also depends to a great extent on how the glass or the glazing was placed. And that's what subcontractors do in the Netherlands. And every unit, residential unit, is unique in the Netherlands. And this leads us to the next simulation of the exact same fire, but now we also left single glazing intact, so it remains closed, the exterior remains closed, and it means that the heat increases, and the 2 sofas over here also catch fire, and then you stop simulation. The conditions in the other spaces are such at some point in time that you don't only get a flashover in the living room, but further on as well in the residential unit. So the conditions are very much determining for what transpires. As Ricardo said, you can't give one single answer. You can't say, okay, this type of residential unit, you're always going to get this result. You get an enormous scale, if you will, of scenarios. And how to prepare for that, I don't know. It's something we'll have to discuss because we don't know how to deal with that yet. I was not allowed to take up more time, so I'm going to stick to the time allotted to me. So I'm done, but I just like to show you two videos of what we just simulated. And you'll see this in a live situation. I'm just showing you this because the two dovetail nicely. Otherwise, I wouldn't have shown you. The first film it's the same fire. It's the fire that starts in the TV set, and this is the early stages of the fire. The glazing is still intact. The big pane here is double glazing, and this is the single glazing in this window here. Both are intact. You see that the fire is propagating. I don't know, Ricardo, is anything going to happen in this video, or can we move on? Comment inaudible to the interpreter. Exactly. So the entire space fills up with smoke. You see a bit of leaking here. As I said, this is an external part that has a lot of ventilation and nooks and crannies and things, and not very important. There's so little oxygen flowing in and out that it doesn't really propagate the fire, but it is important for the buildup of pressure at the beginning of the fire. If you have a fire that's just starting in a house that is well insulated, you will see an increase that is much faster. And this second video coincides with this, and this is just a bit further on in the fire propagation, and here the glazing breaks. This is the single glazing window, and this is why we simulated these two situations. And in the simulation, actually, the fire doesn't develop any further. At some point, all the fuel is burnt, and it can't really flash over to the rest of the home. Ricardo, do you know what happened here? Whether the rest of the home also caught fire? Oh, yes. Comment inaudible to the interpreter. And also, the wind direction is important.
Ja, nou dat is het. Ook de windrichting hebben we meegenomen.
So the direction of the wind is also very important. It has been taken into account in this zone model. It's quite a simple model, but talked about it yesterday. The good thing is that it's easy to make simulations with it, and we include the wind element as well. But it's very difficult to take into account the buildings that surround this building, so simulation and practice will always be rather far apart. So this is my side of the story, and you can move on.